Good morning. You guys ready? Happy Mother's Day. That should have been Rise Up, O Women of God, right? Well, it's been a while since I've spoken to this group. I'm very excited and honored to speak for the moms. We do have some special visitors here today. We do have the moms. That's awesome. Of course, you guys saw Chris and Elizabeth up here from Chicago. Barb and I have a special attachment to Chicago. We led the church there for many years. And then Katie Klein is here today. She must have heard I was speaking, so she came, is that right? All the way from Kentucky. But that's not far compared to this other couple who are from Russia in the back. They're friends of Nicole and Vlad. I appreciate Chris talking about missions. And really, we are the pillar church, believe it or not, for all of Russia and the Caucasus. And so really understanding that your contributions help to fund what we're doing there. And of course, Barb and I are leaving on Tuesday. We're going to be gone for like 5 or 6 weeks to Tbilisi. And there's a spiritual enrichment weekend there, as you have heard. And the Russian leadership is coming down for us to get some time with them there. And then we have to hurry back for TNT. Yeah, I know. We got our own tent there. So it's been a great week. Friday night, we got to see the mothers in action. Okay. There was a number of birthdays celebrated. Lennox, Isaac, and Noah's birthday. Next Friday is Hazel's birthday. And so we went over to the Antoine's house, and they shut the door, and there's kids running all over. I walked in there, I was going, I was kind of freaking out. And the mothers were enjoying it. They're just kind of let everybody else take care of my kid. And of course, we gave them cake and frosting, which helped out a lot. But I forgot those days. It was interesting seeing Alexis kind of laying back there going, another one on the way. You know, when we first planted the church here, there were only 3 kids. So you had Isaac, and Noah was just born. So I know exactly how old he is because we planted the church 7 years ago. So that's awesome. And now there's like 19, and I think I missed one. I think there's actually 20 kids in the church. And we've grown up together. We've had a lot of weddings and all that. And we've sent out a lot of people all over the place. So anyways, I have a few quotes for the mothers. This one is from an unknown source. It says, mothers hold their children's hands for a short time, but their hearts forever. Okay, Abraham Lincoln. All that I am or ever hope to be, I owe to my angel mother. Another unknown one. A mother's hug lasts long after she lets go. Goldie Hawn. She said, the truth is that no matter how old we are, as long as our mothers are alive, we want our mother. And Leonardo DiCaprio said, my mother is a walking miracle, which I can attest to with my mom. You know, the theme here is that our mothers are so influential in our lives. And I have to look back at my life in awe of my mother. Of course, she had four sons in 3 years. I have a twin brother, believe it or not. I'm better looking. We're not identical. So, but in those earlier years, we didn't have a car, and most of the time we didn't have washer and dryer. And so it was before disposable diapers. So the clothesline was full of diapers. Yeah, she was a seamstress, and she made a lot of our clothes. And she did the cleaning, the cooking, helped us with our homework. and many times sitting with us in our illnesses. And I remember her touch, her soothing touch and her help for us. Of course, when one kid gets sick, it kind of gets passed around. And I remember all four of us being sick many times and trying to continue to act sick well past that time. But she did it all because my father was they were married until I was 16, but he was really non-present. And so she had to really engage with all of this, and she was very strong for our sake. Now, unfortunately, us four boys, would break things. Yes, we would. We would break vases. We would break windows. We would break teeth. Yeah, I broke my brother's tooth one time. I threw an Etch-a-Sketch at him. Boom. Knocked out one of his teeth. And they threw an album at me, and we were getting older too. And it shattered in my face. And my mother was there to witness and deal with that. I've been grounded many times for life. Still grounded. Now, what we had to do is learn the art of not looking guilty when you've done something. They come in, they thought, who broke that? What happened? Who did what? You got to work around it. So my mom is still alive. She's going to be 91 next month. Yeah, so that's awesome. But I've also been married to the ultimate mom. Barb is the Proverbs 31 woman. She had to teach me how to handle 3 daughters. Of course, I was only raised with boys, so that was interesting. And Barb is a mom to many. So not just here, but also overseas. So thank you for all your help for the girls. And, thinking about the moms, Barb and I are very connected with all the things emotionally, too, with what's going on in Russia. And, of course, you have the war there. And so you have thousands upon thousands of sons who have been killed. And we've had to really work with the moms who've lost sons and just feel their pain, be there for them, because there's nothing more traumatic than that. It's not meant to be that your children die before you. So today I'm going to talk about a few things. The title of the lesson is A Mother's Influence. We're going to look at 2 areas of motherhood. And the first point is a mother's influence. All right, let's go to Acts chapter 16. Acts chapter 16. And what we find here is that the Apostle Paul has gone out on many missionary journeys, and he's on one, and he ends up coming to, Lystra. And he runs into a group of disciples, and there's a young man by the name of Timothy there. Why don't we just go ahead and read, starting verse 1. It says, he came to Derbe and then to Lystra, where a disciple named Timothy lived, whose mother was a Jewess and a believer, but whose father was a Greek. The brothers at Lystra and Iconium spoke well of him. Paul wanted to take him along on the journey, so he circumcised him because of the Jews who lived in that area, for they knew that his father was a Greek. Okay, you got to look at what's going on here, that Timothy is, they believe, a teenager at this time. But he's a fired up kid. And it says that many spoke well of him. And Paul makes a note that his mother was Jewish, but she was a disciple. She became a Christian, and his father was a Greek. And we know that his mother had to have influence on him for him to become a believer. And so he becomes a disciple, not only a disciple, a very fired up disciple. Everybody's talking about this kid. And Paul says, okay, I want to take you with me, okay, on my journey. But there's a glitch here. okay, we got to circumcise you. Oops. Now that'd be a real challenge. He says it's going to be an obstacle for us to talk to the Greeks and the Gentiles. And so he goes ahead and allows Paul to do this. Now imagine if that was you're counting the cost. It'd be much more challenging, but you see Timothy's heart, he's like, yeah, I'm all in. I'm 100% in. And we can tell that, his father didn't have, I'm sure his father influenced him in many ways, but when it came to spiritual, basically she was able to pull him in to the extent where he was sold out. And he's willing to go. Now, my mother, and hopefully you've seen how your mother has influenced you. Mine has influenced me in many ways, all right? One of the biggest areas is I love to read, and so does my mother. I just absolutely love to read. My idea of heaven is a library, okay? And we talk about books. We even do up to now, 2 or 3 weeks ago, she gave me a book on President Truman. Nice. A very thick book. I'm into history and stuff like that. And so this is a lot of our conversation. She sacrificed to help me to go to college. It's the first one in my family ever to have graduated from college, have a degree. She opened a lot of doors for me. She taught me how to drive. She taught me how to do finances. She taught me my humor. Oh, there you go. Come on, Mom. And she taught me calm in chaos, watching how she handled all of us when we were kids. A number of years ago when we were leading the Chicago church, she would come to church. And I'd say, if any of you have any problems with me, talk to her. It's her fault, that kind of thing. So she was like ready for that. Talk about Jay. Okay, let's go ahead, number of years, to 2 Timothy chapter 1. Now, Timothy is later along in life, and he's leading the church now in Ephesus that they believe grew to 30 to 35,000 members. And so Timothy's doing this thing, and Paul writes him this letter. 2 Timothy chapter 1, verse 3. I thank God whom I serve as my forefathers did, with a clear conscience, as night and day I constantly remember you in my prayers. Recalling your tears, I long to see you so that I may be filled with joy. I've been reminded of your sincere faith, which first lived in your grandmother Lois and in your mother Eunice, and I am persuaded now lives in you also. Okay, what we see here is Paul, their relationship is amazing. He's, man, I'm fired up to come to see you. I recall your tears. So there was an emotional attachment. They felt deeply about things together. But then he says, I'm reminded of your sincere faith. And he comments, he says, first from your grandmother, Lois. And then your mother, Eunice. You know, you see the influence from mom to son. And Paul recognized, he said, hey, these women influenced you and helped you to become the man that you are. Jesus himself was influenced by his mother. John chapter 2. It goes Matthew, Mark, Luke, John. John chapter 2. Starting in verse 1. Very famous situation here. Maybe you've read it a few times. John chapter 2, verse 1. On the third day, a wedding took place at Cana in Galilee. Jesus' mother was there, and Jesus and his disciples had also been invited to the wedding. When the wine was gone, Jesus' mother said to him, they have no more wine. Dear woman, why do you involve me? Jesus replied, my time has not yet come. His mother said to his servants, do whatever he tells you. Nearby stood 6 stone water jars, the kind used by the Jews for ceremonial washing, each holding from 20 to 30 gallons. Jesus said to the servants, "Fill the jars with water." So they filled them to the brim. Then he told them, "Now draw some out and take it to the master of the banquet." They did so, and the master of the banquet tasted the water that had been turned into wine. He did not realize where it had come from, though the servants who had drawn the water knew. Then he called the bridegroom aside and said, "Everyone brings out the choice wine first, and then the cheaper wine after the guests have had too much to drink. But you have saved the best till now." This, the first of his miraculous signs Jesus performed in Cana in Galilee. He thus revealed his glory, and his disciples put their faith in him. After this, he went down to Capernaum with his mother and brothers and his disciples. There they stayed for a few days. Okay, very interesting dynamic situation. All right, Jesus' mother and family, his brothers, his physical brothers and sisters, it says, and the disciples. In verse 12, it says, with his mother, his brothers, and his disciples. A lot of people don't realize that Jesus had physical family, physical brothers and sisters. In fact, it names them. You can go to Mark chapter 3, has a list of their names. And in fact, the book of James was written by his brother, and the book of Jude by one of his brothers. But we see this as a family event. And not only was he and his family invited to the wedding, but also his disciples. And it kind of shows how close they all were. And they start running out of wine. Yeah, problem. And Jesus' mother comes to him and says, "Hey, they have no more wine." And Jesus saying, "Hey, so why do you involve me? My time's not come. I'm not ready." Mary doesn't listen, and she goes ahead, and he goes to the servant, "Do what he tells you, whatever he tells you." It's kind of an interesting dynamic. And I can just see Jesus going, "Mom, not in front of the guys," that kind of thing. But it's amazing how Jesus submitted to his mother. And this was, it says, his very first miracle. She knew he was ready. And she said, "Hey, it's time." It's kind of like the mother bird kicking the other bird out of the nest. Let's go. Let's do this thing. And so she influences Jesus, and he does this incredible miracle. And see, the thing is, Jesus' mother knew what was going on. She knew what he could do. Now, Jesus had amazing respect. You could see that just through his willingness to obey. And she definitely had influence over him. And I think it's really good to really think about how our moms influenced us. I think you need to really think about it, write it down. It'd be a great card. Write it down and thank our moms. A spirit of gratitude. Okay, point number 2, God's heart for moms. Look in Luke chapter 7. Luke chapter 7, verse 11. Luke 7, verse 11. Soon afterward, Jesus went to a town called Nain, and his disciples and a large crowd went along with him. As he approached the town gate, a dead person was being carried out, the only son of his mother, and she was a widow. And a large crowd from the town was with her. When the Lord saw her, his heart went out to her, and he said, "Don't cry." Then he went up and touched the coffin, and those carrying it stood still. He said, "Young man, I say to you, get up." The dead man sat up and began to talk. And Jesus gave him back to his mother. They were all filled with awe and praised God. "A great prophet has appeared among us," they said. "God has come to help his people." This news about Jesus spread throughout Judea and the surrounding country. Wow, this is an amazing situation. It had been incredible to be there. Now, it starts off saying a large crowd went along with Jesus. So he's got a large crowd, and they're following him, and he comes and he sees a funeral procession. Well, in that funeral procession, it says there was a large crowd there also. So you got two large crowds coming together. And really that communicates that this woman had an impact, or the son did, that all these people would show up. And in verse 13, it says, his heart went out to her, and he says, don't cry. Now, Jesus walks up, and he stops the funeral procession. Can you imagine that? Maybe they're on their way to bury him, and they're walking along, and he stops it. And he says, don't cry. And that's just radical right there. Imagine one of us doing that. Hey, let's stop this thing. Then he walks up to the coffin, and he touches it, and he says, young man, I say to you, get up. And he gets up. He sat up. And then he began to talk. How crazy is that? Now, I don't know if there was a cover on the coffin. Boom, that kind of thing. Sits up. Whoa. I mean, you got two large crowds seeing this. They're like, you can just hear it in the back. Whoa, 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 look at that. But then it says he begins to talk. Wouldn't you like to have heard what he said? Yeah. Hey, what's going on? Whoa, what's going on here? Or, wow, that was a weird dream. Whew. Or maybe, oh man, I'm back. So awesome up there. I don't know. In verse 16, they were filled with awe. I can't imagine not being filled with awe. Everybody's mouths are open, you know, and you know, imagine what the meal was like now. You know how they always have a meal. It's a whole different thing. But we look at Jesus' heart here. It says his heart went out to her. And maybe he was thinking, okay, you're a widow, and this is your only son. How are you going to survive? And maybe he had that kind of compassion because he realized it brought him memories of his mom, being a single mom. And we know Joseph is no longer in the picture. And so she had to work with all these kids. And so Jesus went where she was at. He felt her pain, which is what Jesus did continually. He'd go into people's world and inspire them out of it. He didn't just say, okay, hold up, everybody, here, stop this, boom. No, he felt the compassion, and they knew it. Jesus wept at situations. And so we see him emotionally attaching. And the people's response in verse 16 says, God has come to help his people. There you go. And they connected this to God. This is what God is like. And hopefully we understand that. We see that God cares greatly about our suffering and pain. Yep. That he is moved to heart to do things. What does it mean for the people? It means that God brings hope and relief to people in their suffering. And I believe God is moved by our pain and hardships, and he can understand. And certainly Jesus, he can understand a lot because he was born. He went through everything we went through. He understood. He lived as a human. His father wasn't around. And he lived under Roman rule. So he knew what oppression was all about. Do we feel other people's pain? Are we oblivious to the suffering of those around us? Because we're caught up in our world, our finances, our physical pain, relationships, the government, fill in the blank. And do we neglect other people because we're not in touch or in tune with what they're going through? Once again, we see how this woman, a mother, influenced Jesus to action. It's not like she said, Jesus, can you help my son? She said nothing. He automatically felt for her and acted. And I believe there's something about mothers that can pull on our heart. And Jesus certainly felt this and he responded. We need to be moved to action. You know, there's a lot of moms in Milwaukee. There's a lot of moms in Wisconsin. A lot of moms in Russia. The Caucasus that we're working with. Do you know, I saw this statistic that it says 80% of the children born in Milwaukee are born to single moms. 80%. That's like crazy. Do you think there's a lot of needs there? My guess is all of us know numerous single moms. And, there was a single mom in New York. I'll never forget this. Barb reached out to her. She had three kids. She had two, and then she had another one. And she was about as pregnant as you could get. And she's walking these two kids around and would come to all sorts of functions of the church. It would be snowing. People would be calling, you need a ride? She'd just do it. She became a disciple. And it was convicting to see how aggressive she was to be in the fellowship. And, when you see that, it destroys your excuses. I can't, I have a cough. It's just, okay. I want you to go talk to her and tell her how hard you have it. I think we have to build our compassion and move it to action. My challenge, I'm going to close with a challenge. Challenge is to love your moms today, but to have compassion on the people around us. Help us to feel their pain and help us to do something about it, and to God be the glory. Amen.